Welcome to the Two Stewards Show. Imagine a new digital currency that is perfectly optimized for speed, efficiency, and ease of use, seamlessly accepted everywhere, and 100% backed by the largest, strongest, and most benevolent, unshakable, subdivine force the planet has ever seen, namely your country's central bank. This new centralized currency could be the key to liberating the masses from the utter inconvenience and humiliation of having to exchange value privately with one another in the chaos of the unstructured free market, using such rudimentary and cumbersome instruments as literal pieces of paper or heavy round tokens of metal. This currency promises to lift the immense burden of self-custody and the heavy yoke of personal responsibility that is preposterous for the lay citizen to be expected to carry. Just think how free we could all be in a world where our fearless leaders shoulder the full risk and responsibility of maintaining, managing, and from time to time, as necessary for your safety, security, and privacy, manipulating the money supply. CBDCs are coming. Should you be worried? Are your privacy and freedom at risk? To get in touch with the show, visit www.twostewards.ca. Remember, this show is not financial advice, but is valuable for listening amusement purposes. Now, let's liberate the masses.
CBDCs. CBDC really rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
I think it's designed to roll off your tongue, Mark.
That's the first step in making something successful, right? Is having the marketing.
There you go.
Have the name and it. Everybody's comfortable saying it. No, Central Bank Digital Currencies. So
They are coming.
They're coming.
For you.
Well, yeah, for you.
For your convenience.
Oh, for your
safety.
convenience, or just for you? Well, so the most, I guess the one most in the news is the Euro CBDC, but everybody's been talking about different, Canada has floated the idea. It's been talked about in the States. Trump has said, I'm not going to do one. It's a bit of a hot topic item, hot button thing for a lot of people, right? And so we thought we would delve into it today.
What is Mark Carney saying about it?
He hasn't talked about that yet. Although I haven't read his book that I think you threw out.
I got his book as a gift, and I put it on my bookshelf, and it's just really thick, and it took up a lot of space. So I put it behind all the other books.
Oh, okay. So
and,
it's there.
Yeah. And then I reorganized the books, and I may have thrown it out at that point.
Did you have a book burning?
Yeah, no. Sorry I didn't invite you. Maybe I should read it before I burn it. I don't know.
I don't know. I read a few summary notes on it. It was Values was the book, right?
Yeah, Values. Building a better world for all.
Yeah, exactly. So it was all about carbon taxes and environmental terrorism and all that stuff. But I don't know if he talked about CBDCs there, because they usually go hand in hand, right?
Well, because he worked for the central bank, right? And
several,
yeah.
Right? In Canada, in the UK.
And CBDCs are central bank digital currencies. So
yeah.
I wonder if he was directly involved with looking at these things.
Yeah, I'm sure. And it's interesting when you hear, so there's two people specifically that I was, during my research.
Mark and Brent?
I listened to a lot. No. What's her name? Christine Lagarde.
Yeah.
And even Ursula von der Leyen. But they're the sort of the bigwigs in the Eurozone. I should get my names right here.
So Christine Lagarde is the president of the European Central Bank.
Yeah. And then, von der Leyen is the president, I guess, of the EU. Or whatever it's called. But if you listen to them talk, especially Lagarde, right?
Yeah.
Every second word when they're talking about digital currencies is control. Control. And then...
as in, like, the people should be able to control their own money, and we should not have control over their money.
Nope. That was not her point at all.
Okay.
No, it's central control, right? I mean, we should just call it a centrally controlled currency, a CCC. Yeah. And then your good buddy there, Augustin Carstens of the Bank for International Settlements. Which
What makes him my good buddy?
I don't know. I thought when you looked him up, you experienced the kinship. He's so the Bank for International Settlements is the sort of central bank of central banks, right? And they really throw their weight around.
No, you're making fat jokes here.
I know. Well,
He's the general manager of the Bank of International Settlements.
I think I'm qualified, Brent.
Yeah. Okay.
You know,
well,
you can make
you
fun
throw
of
your weight around.
your own people group.
Yeah.
Anyways, no, he's.
I think I'm a lightweight.
Central banker of central bankers, and they do a lot of stuff with like loans for countries that get into trouble, right? Sort of the banker of last resort, and they also make a lot of bad decisions, in my opinion. I mean, you know what I think about central banks, anyways. That is not the worst one. No, but a lot of it is very punitive terms on, and they work with the IMF as well, right? International Monetary Fund.
Yeah.
So like they're all kind of tied together, and
so one argument is that CBDCs are a solution in search of a problem.
Yes.
Right. We're developing technology that the bank will have, like the central bank of the country will be able to control. And it has all these new technological features, but really what's the problem with the current system?
Well,
like, why can't people just use cash? What's wrong with that?
Cash. Oh, you terrorists use cash.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's, yeah, if you
don't they use Bitcoin, terrorists?
Well, I mean,
that's just drug traffickers, right?
Yeah, that too. Well, it's funny how you hear the same arguments trotted out against whatever the current thing is that they don't like.
Yeah,
right?
Bad people use it.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's I don't know. You can read the Euro Bank has like all their FAQs on digital euro, like what value does it offer and this and that, and so they talk about like quicker settlements and then something across the whole eurozone. It's like you have the euro, like if we go there, I buy stuff like I pay in euros, right? And you can use a credit card, you can use this or that, and yeah, maybe the fees are higher on a credit card, but there's alternatives. Like I think they're just really stretching. There's payment solutions, and behind the scenes, maybe it could be better. But their whole point is like, no, this is going to be great for everybody. And my response to that would be like, if it is so great, and if there is such a need, the private sector will develop it because they'll see the need and it'll be better, and everybody will be happy, right?
Yeah.
Private sector hasn't done that yet.
But when it comes to money, do we really want the private sector to be issuing and creating and exploring these sorts of things?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
You don't want the government to do it for us?
No, I want the government to get out of money production, out of money control.
Yeah.
Like 100%. I mean, you're being a little tongue in cheek here because we're both Bitcoiners. But I mean, that is one of the features of Bitcoin, right? Is that it is not centrally controlled. And so, maybe you don't like Bitcoin, but it's the same argument for people that like for gold bugs, right? This is something that I can have that the government can't control. They can try to. Yeah. They can try to confiscate it.
Yeah. So, but what is a CBDC built on? Like, is it technology? It's still built on this blockchain. Like they always say we're using this cryptocurrency as a base layer or something to build on top of. Is that true? Or are they rebuilding their own block? Like, that's the thing I guess maybe we need to point out is that Bitcoin has one blockchain technology that's decentralized. All these other ones that like Ethereum, XRP, whatever it is, they have a centrally controlled, like somebody is at the helm. Or like if the government wants to, they can shut that thing down, or they can at least influence the person who runs it.
Well, that's the whole point of it.
Yeah.
Right.
But that makes it great to build a CBDC on top of, right? Because
and so you wouldn't, let's say they use Ethereum, for example, for a CBDC, and they've done trials on this, right? It wouldn't be actually Ethereum. It would be like an offshoot of it or something, so that the price of ETH wouldn't matter. But it's the underlying platform that is sort of the solution.
Yeah.
That they use, right? And it's been, like you said, ETH or XRP or Monero is another one that's been quite popular. But I mean, the biggest central feature is the controllability. so that they can issue it quickly. And I mean, this is part of the argument, right? Is that if, let's say there's a recession, Brent, or there's, more tariffs or something come, the government can just like snap of a finger, put money into your account. And they could do it to 41 million Canadians. Just be like, boom, here's $200 for everybody. Like immediately. Direct.
So it skips the commercial banks.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to kind of diffuse through the system and then eventually get to you. It's just the payment from our bank account to yours.
100%. So now the question is...
That sounds great. Why would we not want that?
Exactly. And then you need merchants to accept this CBDC. So there is still stuff on the back end. So you mentioned one thing there, the banks. Like, what do the banks think about this? Because if you're bypassing the banks, I go, this is how they make their money, is by being the middleman. And so that's one clue, I think, in the adoption of CBDCs. Like, is it going to be that smooth? I don't know. Right? Because you need to have the banks on board. So there has to be some way for them to make money off of the CBDC. And I don't really see how they can do that. Because if they're shaving a few points off, it defeats a little bit of the purpose of the government sending you money.
Yeah. Like a CBDC would make them obsolete. Like they're not going to like it, the commercial banks.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how far you go with CBDCs, right? Because if you need a mortgage, how do you get a mortgage? So would they still be able to
have all those products,
generate money in the CBDC form as a mortgage, right? So would they still be able to say, okay, here's $500,000. We're just going to add that to the ledger. So if they could that way, fine. Because I don't think banks are actually that interested in consumer accounts. I don't think they really make any money off of them. It's more a form of getting people in so that they will buy other products, right? Investment products, mortgages, all that stuff. So, maybe on that side, the banks don't really care. If they didn't have to have, just think, if they didn't have to have branches with tellers, and that would be great, right? Yeah. Just do your stuff online, and they can get rid of all the branches and all the tellers, and maybe have a few consultants here and there for mortgages and stuff. But even that, do it online.
This whole conversation, central bank digital currency, we haven't seen, if you look back in history, governments or central banks haven't had the available technology to be able to do something like this. So we always go back to the Roman Empire. And, if the government wanted to centrally control the currency, there's limits to that, right? And the limits, they had gold. Okay, well, you have to actually go get the gold out of the ground and you have to refine it. And you have to kind of, you can control the money supply in a certain sense, but there's limits to that. Whereas in a digital world, it kind of opens the floodgates to a whole bunch of different options for the government, right? If you're running the currency and you can control how much of it is in existence and who you give it to and when and what they can do with it or what they can't do with it, or the argument is made, people who don't like CBDCs that, the government gave me $200 a month for the last year and I spent it on, booze and cigarettes. And now 20 years later, I got health problems and I'm going to the hospital and the government's looking at my CBDC account going, wait a minute, you bought a lot of products that cause these health problems. I don't think you're going to have access to the same services. And so these what's going to happen in 20 years, right? But those sorts of, you say control, those sorts of things couldn't be monitored in previous eras with previous technologies.
I mean, to a certain extent, right? I've just been listening to some historical stuff about England. So right around the turn of the the first millennium, the year 1000, around there. And I think it was, who was the king? Ethel something. They have a lot of Ethels in their names. Ethelred, Ethel Flynn, Ethel whatever. But maybe it was Ethelred the Unready or something. They called him that because Vikings came and beat them up. But they had at that point developed, England was really unique in that area of in the European area, if you want to call it that, because they had developed a pretty good bureaucracy. And they, at one point,
Do those two things go together, good and bureaucracy?
Well, so
Efficient.
what they had was well, I'll describe it. You tell me if it's good or not. But they had sort of a unified kingdom in England, right? The kingdom of, and it was Anglo-land or something. But most of it was sort of unified. And then they concentrated on, building bureaucracy, which was like a new idea. They didn't increase it, but they actually built it. And then they kept records of everything. And then at one point, they took all the gold and silver, and they're like, turn it all in, and we'll give it back to you with, as a new coin.
In coin
so they
form.
all the coin that, like any coins that you have, send them in, and we're going to remint them with like the current king's face on them, whatever. But that is going to be the currency, and we, don't use anything else for trade. So. And that worked well. Trade was stimulated across England. It was a very wealthy country, which made it a target. But the point is they centralized it. But then they could also, they had now tax records and who owns what and how much is that land worth. And then here's your tax. So when Canute, I love that name, King Canute, at one point it was back and forth, right, with the Vikings and the Anglo-Saxons. But anyways, at one point Canute was in control of a large portion of the country, and one year he instituted 100% tax. Right, he needed to like rebuild his armies and stuff, but it was 100% tax. But they had the records and the infrastructure to actually do it. So it's not like this is.
So if we think we have bad with taxes now.
Well, he only did that for 1 year.
Right.
He wasn't going to like completely destroy it, but he wanted to get his cut. But
sounds like it's not what would happen today. It's like the temporary measure that is, nothing more permanent than a temporary government measure.
Who knows? And a lot of these guys, when they're bringing the coinage back in and then sending it back out, well, they would keep a little bit.
Right.
It's like, we'll take a few points off the side. But anyways, all this to say that it is not without precedent. And then you can see what happens when you have this level of centralized control. Like, they can implement 100% tax. And so we're talking like, where are we now? So 1,000 years ago, right?
So that's that works if you can trust the institution or the people behind it, right? Like like you said, if it was a good king and he was the one in control and he made wise decisions that were based on good principles and he sought the best for the citizens and didn't just say, I want to do things in your best interest, and it's to protect you from, currency swings or recessions or poverty. And, this is for your safety and convenience and security and all this. And then meanwhile, he's nefariously collecting 120% tax, right? So,
well, that's a really important point, I think. And I think that is at the heart of CBDCs and CBDC adoption, is making people want it. Because there's been, and maybe we should go through a couple examples of how this has been tried and it failed because people just didn't want it. So you have, just real quickly.
That's because they make the CBDC and then they don't spend 20% of it on marketing.
Yeah, exactly. No marketing budget. No, they had big marketing budgets. But so quickly, Finland in the 90s, they had this thing called Avant, and it was essentially like cards. But remember, this is the 90s, so this is like
playing cards
before Interact. No, like Interact cards.
Interact,
whatever, right?
okay.
And you could just load this card, and it would be like cash, and you could use it all over. And there, lots of retailers took it. And so this is
it kind of like the cards where if you do that, then they give money to your school? Like vouchers?
No. I don't know if they had they supported private education, but anyway, so they rolled it out, but they kind of bungled it. They gave it to a private provider, which is fine, but then they're like, well, in order for this to work, we need fees, and then people were like, but then this is as debit was sort of coming on board, right? Everybody just switched to debit. The whole thing failed.
But this is an environment of adoption by choice, right? Like voluntary adoption.
Yes.
So the people said in a competing marketplace, there's this option, which is the government issued centrally controlled card system that is fraught with all these issues. And then there's interact.
Well, and then, their debit started becoming popular, and everybody was like, we'll use this.
Or Fincoins. I don't know what their what is their currency called.
Fins.
So that's an example in history of the government trying to create something and not being adopted.
Yeah, 100%. So there's that was in the 90s. Ecuador, I think, was 2014. Did something similar. They tried it. Very poor adoption rates by consumers, by retailers. It died. Right now, you've got so people will be like, "Oh yeah, but there's stuff out there now."
Yeah,
and it works. Like, look at the Bahamas, right? Bahamas has one, and it's interesting. They have 2 tiers of wallets. So one is like a maximum $8,000 you can have in it, and you can spend $1,000 a month, maximum. And then the other one is like, it's something like,
so how far
10
does that go
that.
in the Bahamian?
Yeah, not very far. And I think they call them sand dollars or something. But anyways, so there's limits on both of these things as to what you can spend, which just tells you the direction they want to go, right? Like monthly consumption limits. Very low adopt, like less than 1% of the total currency that's out there. You have the East Caribbean Currency Union. So there's a bunch of islands in the Caribbean that got together to do the same thing. Can't really find data on the adoption rates, but interestingly, in 2022, the system went down, right? They had expired certificates, and I'm not a web guy or whatever, but it sounds like, I don't know, like unexpire the thing or put a new certificate in. It was down for 6 weeks.
So if
you imagine if your entire payment system for the economy was down for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Anyways, very low adoption.
It's not
funny. They have something in Jamaica, Jamdex, I think it is. Nobody really uses it, right? Even China has the e-yuan. And again, very low adoption rates.
Even though they are in China where everything is forced upon you?
Yeah, this isn't forced on them yet.
Right.
So it's very strongly suggested. But they have WePay or Alipay. So like they just have their phones. They don't have wallets. I mean, that's a broad generalization. They don't have wallets in China. But I mean, typically for transactions, most people just use their phones. And they have an app on there and it works. So like, why would we switch to this other thing, right?
Well, you think about it. If you had a CBDC, you wouldn't have to all be digital. Like you'd have to do every payment in the digital
everything,
world. Yeah, nothing physical.
Yeah. Which, I mean, again, in China, there's like not a lot of cash. In cities anyway, in urban areas, right? So yeah, and then the best one would be Nigeria. The best example.
What makes it the best one?
Because, well, it's the worst one.
Okay. I was going to say, like, based on my reading of history, it didn't seem to go so well in Nigeria.
Well, so they're like, hey, guys, we want to introduce this thing called the e-Naira. So the Naira is the unit of currency there. 95% of the population was like, no, we don't like that idea. And they're like, okay, well, we're rolling it out anyways. So they said any cash you have is going to be invalid there's a certain time period, right? So you're going to have to get this, the e-Naira. Now, in the meantime, we'll have some new cash to replace the old cash, because the whole point is they wanted to get all the cash out of the system, take in all the actual physical money, get rid of it, and then replace it with the new stuff. So
who thinks of these decisions,
indeed, the IMF and the WEF. That's who.
And they imposed it upon Nigeria?
They didn't impose it, but they were both, like, who knows, right, with loan terms and all that stuff if they imposed it. But they worked hand in hand with the Nigerian government to implement this. So this is like, these are big organizations who should know, like, what they're doing and stuff, like they're professional, you would think, right? So they were in there like a dirty shirt. So first off, they didn't have enough new cash to replace the old cash. So that was a problem, because everybody went to the banks and they would be like big lineups at the banks and stuff.
The government's like, man, everybody's richer than we thought.
Yeah.
Shoot, we need more cash.
Yeah. So they did not have enough cash. So you had people literally, like, once the old cash was, no longer legal tender, like, people were stuck. Like, oh, I can't get to work now because I have cash and I haven't been able to trade it in at the bank because the bank didn't have enough
Just for
cash.
context, like how long ago was this?
Within the last couple of years.
Okay. Yeah, because
Like there's still
just
like
trying, like
2022,
people
I
should
think.
be thinking in Canada, okay, imagine if the government said, all right, next week, everybody has to bring their cash over here
Yeah.
and trade it in.
Yeah. So complicating factor, most of the poor folks in Nigeria don't have bank accounts.
They're just unbanked.
They're unbanked. Now, they probably have a cell phone, so I guess the idea is you could skip right over the bank and just, if you have a cell phone, now you can have
Now you can participate.
your currency on there. But so 3.5 months, many people had no money. So the middle class, apparently, like they transitioned to this e-Naira and they were able to use it, and that was fine because they had access to banking services and all that jazz, right? Anyways, it was a disaster. 3.5 months, like people were starving, and essentially everybody, not everybody, but a huge percentage of the population resorted to barter. Like just old fashioned, like I've got some, like a donkey and you've got fuel, like let's do a trade, right? And they just did that and it was fine.
It was not fine. They were lighting banks on fire. They were smashing ATMs. They,
Okay, but other than
roadblocks
that,
and riots.
other than that part, it was fine.
Oh,
No, it was a disaster.
you're spreading false information,
Yeah, well.
false news.
So right now, 0.5% of the population uses the CBDC.
So booming success.
Now, you could be like, well, say they're just backwards and they don't know technology. No, 50% of Nigerians use some form of cryptocurrency. 50%.
Which is digital
Yeah.
native currency.
Yeah. Yeah. So, hey, some of that's Bitcoin, but there's lots of other ones there.
So was
And I
it
think
just
this
the
was-
implementation of it then, Mark? And we can do it better next time?
Well, you
Like
could
the government's got to be learning from this.
You can say that. It was. So that's an argument against the advent of CBDCs, is that governments are hopelessly incompetent at rolling anything
Yeah,
out.
just because it exists doesn't mean it will be successful.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll see. But this was like Nigeria, they're trying to solve some problems, right? They had problems with cash supply management, the people using crypto already, and they're like, we got to get them off of this crypto and onto
Because
something else.
we can't control it.
Exactly. And anyways, so at some point there was an election, new government, although it's the same party, came in, and the new president was like, okay, this is...
I love it. That's like Carney.
Yeah, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. They're like, you know what? We're just going to reintroduce the old dollar or the old Naira that we had. So if you still have any of that cash, it's good.
But did the people still have all their cash? Like
A lot of it was gone.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, yeah, they still had it because they couldn't actually exchange it for this new stuff. So anyways, now you got to trade in your new stuff for the old stuff. Crazy. Silence from the IMF, WEF. And they also were like
Not even laughter or anything?
nervous laughter, maybe. People like the offices. And the central bank governor, conveniently, was he got done for fraud and corruption. And so I can't help but thinking like he's just the scapegoat for this whole thing, because he was like the guy in charge of rolling this out.
Right.
And, they're like, oh, we found he has like 693 bank accounts with like, millions of dollars across the world and stuff. So it's like, yeah, like that's probably true. He was probably corrupt, but that had nothing to do with this cryptocurrency.
Or the failure of
Or
the CBDC.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, not this crypto, but the CBDC. I think it was just convenient for them to be like, oh, here is the man who caused all your problems. We're going to throw him in jail, and now our problems are over. So it's like, no, they're not. But anyways, unmitigated disaster. And I think the main thing is like people didn't want to use it. Some people did. Most didn't. And then they also...
That's a cultural thing, right?
Yeah, because it wasn't like people were switching to the CBDC. They wanted to get the new cash. They weren't necessarily going with this CBDC. So, and yeah, there's a high level of mistrust of government in Nigeria. Like, what a shock, right? As much as we think, like, we can't, as much as I think we can't or shouldn't trust our government, they have a lot more reasons there, right? As evidenced by the central bank governor with his millions and millions of looted dollars. So, anyways, there's a few examples of CBDCs that have been tried to roll out. And so in October, we get to see, unless it gets delayed again, we get to see what happens with the Euro CBDC. And I imagine we will have...
they're making some great progress over there.
One episode on that.
I got to read. Can I read from the European Central Bank?
Can you read?
Executive summary?
I mean, yeah, if you can read.
If I can read. Well, this is a progress report on kind of where things are at with their digital euro project. The Eurosystem's digital euro project aims to make central bank money available to the public in digital form. That is great. As e-commerce evolves and people increasingly prefer to make payments using electronic means, a digital euro would bring the valued features of banknotes into the digital sphere. Would you agree, Mark?
Wow.
Well, like it's saying there's a lot of features that this new technology will offer to people.
And clearly, there's nothing like that exists right now.
And people increasingly prefer to do this.
Increasingly.
Solution in search of a problem. The aim of a digital euro is to bring value to consumers, merchants, and intermediaries while reducing Europe's dependence on international card schemes and non-European digital payment wallet providers. That sounds like they're making an enemy out of everyone else and saying, we're going to... A digital euro would complement cash by providing a digital payment option for consumers that is free, safe, and easy to use. It just goes on and on. But yeah, it sounds like they're well underway kind of researching this thing. And you can kind of follow their whole thing on the European Central Bank website.
If you really want to.
Yeah.
Add it to the list of subscriptions.
But it's free. It's safe. It's convenient. And people are increasingly using digital payments. So it's something that we should adopt and we should step in and do. Do you buy that? Mean, does that make sense? Do you like?
No, I don't. No, I don't buy it for a minute. Right? If people are increasingly using digital payments, then why do you need to add another one?
Yeah.
Right? And it's free. Like, I don't know. That seems a little bit. I don't know. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Like, you're doing this out of the goodness of your hearts. So if you, again, just listen to, like, don't just read what they say.
Yeah.
But listen to what they say. And again, you got Lagarde and Carsons and all, they just talk about control, right? Augustin Carsons was quoted as saying, and this is like one of their, I think like a presser or like a promo thing that they put out. So they're not trying to hide it. He's like, right now, we don't know if somebody is spending $100 bill. We don't know right now if somebody is spending 1,000 peso bill. And I'm like, yeah, that's good. You shouldn't know. Like, why do you need to know this? And then Lagarde is talking like it's all control, and they put it under the guise of safety, which is like the most pernicious thing we've had in the 21st century, right? Everything's about safety this and safety that. And, you can talk about the feminization of society and so forth, and the emphasis on safety and what that has done to our society. And, I could go off about that, but it's all about safety.
Well, it's
and
an
everybody
important
just
consideration because that creates the cultural context that these things are launched into, right? So if you're a culture that strongly believes freedom is important, well, every freedom has a cost to it, right?
Yeah.
If you want to be free, you have to take responsibility. So when it comes to money, like if you want to have own your own money, right? It can be a bearer instrument, meaning like you physically hold the instrument with which you settle transactions. If you give up that freedom because you don't want to take that responsibility, right? Like imagine I gave you a gold coin. Well, now you're walking around with that value in your hand.
This would work better if you actually gave me one, just so I can understand the illustration, Brent.
I was going to up the ante and make it like a gold bar. So let's say I give you a gold bar.
Okay.
Here is literal value, right? And you can't lift it, but here it is. And now you got to protect this thing, right? And unless you want to lose it, but if you want to maintain the value, you're going to be responsible for it. So you're going to put it somewhere, you're going to protect it, you're going to keep an eye on it, and that's your responsibility. So the freedom of having control over your money and having the control to spend it and to interact with final settlement whenever you want is great. But if you give that up and you say, like, you know what, I just don't want to, like, what if somebody comes and attacks me and I'm physically harmed because of this freedom of having the ability to transact? So I'm just going to give that to an institution. I give it to a bank. They'll take care of it for me.
Fort Knox.
Yeah, they'll give me a little slip of paper that says the value's here when you need it. We'll take care of it. We'll take the risk of getting attacked because we have security systems in place. It's all good. Go take your little piece of paper, and that way, if like somebody's not going to just try and take that, right? It's a lot easier to protect, maybe, whatever. Even better, it's a digital format, so it's just a number on a thing, right? Well, now you've given up that freedom to have direct control over your money in the name of convenience and less responsibility, safety. Yeah.
Well, there's always a trade-off with safety, right? If you increase safety, you reduce freedom. And so you have to find that fine line, like, I don't know, like seatbelts, right? I remember a colleague that was like against seatbelts in cars. I'm like, you're just stupid. Like, come on. Like, I know it's the law and who are they're...
The freedom to smash your face off the windshield.
Exactly. Like this big seatbelt trying to take away our freedoms. Like, yeah, there's a line somewhere, but it ain't there. Like, just put your seatbelt on, you ding dong. But like you wouldn't wear it. So yeah. There's a line. I guess we have to find that line, but I don't know. I'm not.
Well, then the line of argument around, the government should step in and protect people from those bad people, right? Like, there's unsavory characters out there doing evil things. We should censor their speech. Or
I only want savory characters. Maybe some sweet too, sweet and savory.
Oh, this is going back to that potato thing you showed me.
Okay, let's just stop everything.
Okay.
And, if you're listening, go to potatoparcel.com.
We're not sponsored by this, by the way.
Yet.
No.
Yet. Okay, they're not available in Canada just yet, but potatoparcel.com. Oh, I love it. I love it. So it's this guy who he's like, you know what? Instead of sending like flowers.
This is such a side tangent.
It is, but it's in my notes, Brent. So, I have
to do it. It's in the notes. Okay.
It's in the notes. I just read whatever's in the notes.
Someone put it there. I wouldn't put it there, but you put it there.
This is going to be the best segment ever. Potatoparcel.com. So instead of sending somebody flowers, you can send them a potato with a personalized message on it. Like, hey, Brent, you rock.
No, it'd be more like haters gonna hate, taters gonna tate, or something.
And they've expanded it, right? So now you can send it with like a package of candy or like all the stuff you can do with flowers, essentially. But no, this guy started with just like, a marker and some potatoes, and kind of took off. And now the business is growing. I think they were even on Shark Tank or whatever. So...
Okay.
You want to send...
Maybe we should get this guy to launch the CBDC program.
CBDC? Central Potato Digital Currency? Oh, man. Potatoes is currency.
Yeah, then we'll have a potato famine, and what's he going to do? See, he's not recession-proof. The government should step in and control his currency.
Exactly.
But we were talking about freedom of speech and unsavory characters.
Well, I mean, this is freedom to do ridiculous things and freedom for people to...
I was going to say, we should make the government censor this guy so he doesn't, before he causes too much harm.
Yeah, I'm surprised someone's like, you can't send potatoes through the mail. Anyways, potatoparcel.com, have a look at it.
But if you think about safety, right? So if the government wants to, in the context of money, like stop, you mentioned terrorists, or, maybe they want to block donations to a certain thing. That never happened before in Canada in recent history.
Nope, sure hasn't.
No. Anything that goes counter anti-establishment, maybe we can block that, or restrict spending on certain things, right? If these things are harmful to you, or they're going to cost the government more money. We mentioned healthcare, or protests, right? So if somebody's buying supplies or something for participating in a protest, well, we need to be able to restrict that. Like, isn't that in the public's best interest, in the interest of the people, in the interest of peace and safety?
So the things that I would say are in public interest is, a digital currency. Like, yes, I'm fine with that, right? Something so that I don't have to carry around this gold bar, and like you can just come smack me on the head and take it, because that's not great. So I don't need the government to mandate it, but and again, this is why we're fans of Bitcoin, right? People have called it digital gold. That's not quite correct, but it's the idea of it's a uncontrolled, like a decentralized thing that's digital, and like it's awesome. We live in a digital world, so we should have a currency or a means of payment that reflects that, or a store of value that reflects that. So that part I agree with, right? But it's the control by the central bank, or by anybody really, centrally controlled currency, is the part that I have a problem with. But people will say, well, but it's about safety. We need safety.
I'm just thinking, not that people would be able to articulate that and say it's about safety, but maybe you're the 1 in 10 people who would be able to say, I don't want to give up these freedoms because of that. But if you look at even the last 30, 40 years of technological development and the freedoms that people have given up already in the name of convenience and reduced responsibility, maybe safety, but probably convenience, right?
Yep.
Even think about your smartphone. Like, before you had a smartphone, would you have given up your location information at any given moment to some unknown corporation for free?
Yeah.
Would you ever
willingly.
even done that, right?
Happily.
Well, what if they made it so convenient to do everything in your life digitally, the tap of a finger, get access to information? Well, now you're willing to give up that freedom of location information, as an example, right?
Yeah.
Or if you think about Facebook and just, hey, you can use this platform to network with your friends, and how convenient it is to communicate and, search on Facebook Marketplace and see what your, great aunt is doing around the world. But by the way, like, we're taking your data and we're selling it over here and here and here and trying to make scads of money on marketing and advertising. So I think as a society and as a culture, like, there might be a small portion of people who say, wait a minute, I don't want to give up my freedoms for these conveniences because I don't believe in it. And that's a principled stand. But I think majority of people just, they see technology develop. It's more convenient, right? You just think about videos, like, who watches a long video? They watch TikTok. It's like way more convenient, funny, fast. Like, it's just these quick hits of
dopamine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so you're pointing out my hypocrisy.
That's what I'm trying to do here. You're going to be the first adopter of the CBDC. It's going to come out. It's like, yes, look at all the money I got on my UBI. Doesn't your phone even come from China? Look at that thing.
Yeah, it does. They're probably listening. Stop it. G Ping. They're probably listening right now. I mean, everybody's phone comes from China, whether it's a Chinese brand or not. But you're true. There is a lot of freedoms that we have given up. I don't know, either unsuspectingly, or I think most people know now and just don't care, because I think the attitude is like, you know what, all my information the government has somewhere anyways, so like, whatever.
Yeah,
it is what it is. I can't get by without this phone or without this technology. So, to a certain degree, but I mean, there's got to be a line somewhere, and so maybe I'm okay with giving up my information. There's other people who are like, no, get rid of, like, no smartphone, no nothing, and maybe they got a point, right? So the government doesn't know anything about me. But I guess it's the next step. And maybe that's the problem, right? We're like lobsters is it lobsters or no, frogs in a boiling pot, right? If you throw them in a boiling pot, they'll jump out. But if you put them in a lukewarm water and then boil them, they're fine. Because they're like, oh, temperature's going up. This is fine. It's not too big of a change. I'm used to this. And then eventually they're boiled and you're eating frog legs.
But wouldn't all the other people, like, Christine Lagarde and Augustin Carson's and all these guys, like they would be boiled frogs too, no? Or are they going to have a separate app with different money
Oh yeah,
that doesn't?
100%.
Yeah. So we got to get on that one.
Yeah, we need the secret app. We need the Illuminati app.
And I think that comes to financial sovereignty, right? Like, do you actually have the ability to maintain ownership of your own money? Like, because money represents the value of your time
Yeah.
and labor, right?
Yep.
You've heard that before. And if you've worked so hard for this, do you not want to maintain ownership of it and not risk giving it over in half?
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, if you give up financial sovereignty, you essentially give up like your self-sovereignty. But I just want to I made a couple notes about like what is a CBDC. We talked about it already.
You should have read that off the beginning, right?
I know, I should have, but what am I going to do?
Yeah.
No, but some features of CBDCs that are touted, right? So they're time limited, they're product limited. Sorry, they can be time limited, they can be product limited.
So how do you think about money that's time limited?
Well, let me just get through the rest.
Sorry.
They can be geographically limited, and they're an instrument of control, of finance, of behavior, etc. So yeah, time limited. Like, what is that? That's sort of a new one, right? We're comfortable
Spend
with,
this by this time, otherwise you lose the value.
Yeah, 100%. So do you want that? Do you want it to be product limited? So Brent, you shouldn't really be buying steak anymore. So instead, buy
Crickets.
tofu or buy these cricket steaks or whatever, right? Geographically limited. So you can buy stuff in Hamilton,
But
we don't really like you traveling a lot. So outside of this region, it actually doesn't work. You can't spend these funds. So it's curious, right?
Curious or scary?
Well, it's everything. Because like how would they implement this? How would they get you to voluntarily take this? Like they probably wouldn't. But what they can do, and when I say they, I mean the government, is, let's say there is a universal basic income, and this is kind of goes hand in hand with the CBDC, is they can now give you a supplement, right? Because the economy is so bad, et cetera, like don't bother go looking for a job or creating value somewhere. We're just going to give you, let's say, $2,000 a month because everything's so bad, right? And you're like, awesome, like free money, don't have to work for it. It takes takes the pressure off, fine. But there's going to be some limits on this stuff. So it's like, okay, fine, right? And that's how it works its way into the ecosystem. So, in this case, it would be like, yeah, you can't buy meat, you can't buy like plane tickets or whatever with this money. So and maybe you'd be like, okay, that's fine. I'll just limit my usage of this money, and then my other money, I'll use it to buy the other stuff. Well, then eventually you become entirely reliant on this CBDC. That's all your money. And then guess what? Because again, this isn't like, I'm not just pulling stuff out of a hat here. Yeah, you didn't think I was going to say that, did you? But they, like Carney, for example, and others have talked about this, right? We talk about 15-minute cities, the big conspiracy theory, but the whole idea of limiting how much flight people do in a year, right? And that's when they talk about these 15-minute cities, this is the stuff they talk about, right? You want to make sure that you have no more than like one flight per year. You don't buy more than X amount of new clothing. You don't eat by X amount of meat, all this stuff.
And that comes from a desire to preserve the environment?
This is what they say. Yeah. I mean, it's all hogwash, but it's under the guise of environmental activism, right? Which I don't even think they believe that, right? They can find enough people to believe that.
Control over people's behavior.
Control. But you can give it like a good face so that the environmentalists would be like, oh yeah, that's right. We shouldn't fly so much, or we shouldn't eat meat or whatever, right? We got, my wife and I got shamed in Holland a few years back, right? Well, because we went to Holland and then we flew on to Prague like for the weekend. And I can't remember the word in Dutch, but essentially it works out to flight shame, right? They're like, don't you have any flight shame? Like, what? Well, you're just like flying here and flying there, and think of the environment and the carbon and stuff. And I'm like, you guys, for 6 weeks every year, pack up your cars and campers and drive over to Spain, right? Like, don't lecture me on taking a plane ride somewhere when you're driving all over Europe when you on your many months of vacation. But anyways, that's just one example, right? You get people to buy into this nonsense.
Well, and the money at that point, because it's digital, is programmable. They can change. They can change the protocol. So if one day it's plane tickets, the next day it could change, or it could be more restricted or less restricted depending on demand. And didn't that work in Russia really good? The Russian Gosbank or whatever.
I did not research that one.
Okay, well, let's just say it didn't. There was a lot of deaths.
Well, so, and what it reminds me of is the social credit system in China, right? Because we're painting this dystopian picture like that would never happen, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, it happens in China, like not necessarily related to the currency or to money, but they absolutely have a social credit system, and they just shut off parts of your life. So like a dissident journalist, for example, all of a sudden, like, oh, you can't take a train ride to the city.
Yeah.
You can't get out of the city on the train.
Why is it that they want to control behavior so much?
Well, it's just control of people, right?
Yeah.
So that you remain in power. That's essentially what it is, right? If you can control the people, then you control everything, and you can have a good life. And we know that's what happens in China, right? The top Communist Party officials are wealthy, like beyond imagination, and they live the life that they want. That comes
until
at the cost
they say
of
something bad, and then they're out, and the next guy.
Yeah, I mean that's a bit of a problem with that setup. But while you're good, it's really good. So.
Yeah. So I still think that the CBDCs won't be ubiquitous everywhere, and there's still many countries that have a culture that wouldn't tolerate it, because CBDC is like Eurozone is doing it across Europe, but it's not like there will be one global currency.
No.
So like there would be one, if that was to be the case, there would have to be one central government or one central organizing body that everybody was under the control of or trusted. So
like a new world order?
Kind of. But there will always be a way to subvert that, right? To go around it. So if you think, people are always trying to find the best way to exchange value with one another in a local context, right? So while these politics might be happening over there, like I still need to buy my groceries, or I still need to, right? And I'm going to be producing value by working. I'm going to need to save that value in something. And if the CBDC is not going to cut it for me, then I'm either going to vote with my feet and go somewhere else, because I have that sovereignty still. So until they put me in my little box, I can still go somewhere else and use their money, or I'll find another technology or another way to subvert the system. So I don't know if that's just like keep your eyes open, and I just don't think they will be ubiquitous everywhere.
No, I also don't like the Euro thing. That'll be interesting when they roll out the Euro CBDC. We'll see how it actually goes.
We're going to get a ton of immigrants.
No, but one thing you have in Europe is a pretty compliant population, right? The farmers notwithstanding, they're still protesting all over the place, and Tommy Robinson in the UK, but it's a fairly compliant population there. So I think it has a better chance of success because, as you pointed out
docile,
earlier,
no backbone.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Like, you look at the UK. This is the biggest empire on Earth, right? The sun didn't set on the British Empire, and like, how far have they fallen? And I know people are like, "Oh, empires are bad." Fine, we'll debate that another time. But how the mighty have fallen. But in order for this to work, you need people to agree to it. You can't force this on them. So I tend to agree with you. The whole CBDC thing is, it's the idea, I think, is dangerous and problematic. But actually, is it going to happen? I don't know. We'll watch the Euro thing. So the two things are, if people don't want to be controlled, you can have like the hardest time doing that.
But if you read these books like, 1984 or some of these kind of science or dystopian novels, this is the whole idea of like thought control, right? So it's behavior control. Okay, we got that down pat in this future society, but thought control is like the next layer. And that, like, the story kind of always goes where there's thought control with the masses, and then there's like this main character who has like thoughts that are outside of the thing, right? And it's like, wait a minute, I'm actually a free person, and they can't control my thoughts. And then they slowly, kind of go against the system and find a new world or whatever. And these two opposing ideas. Like, one is you conform and you're under the control of the central body, or the other one is you think for yourself and you end up doing your own actions and you're free to make your own behavior or whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the story of human history too, I think, is, new governments are formed and then there's a revolution or an uprising, and, that's not all just like freedom-loving people. There's evil is in there as well. But human nature, I guess, right, is going to make it very hard. And the other one is just part of human nature too, but it's just government incompetence, right? Governments have shown that they're not really good at anything other than wasting money and being inefficient. So
CBDCs sound like a recipe for success there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the other thing that gives me some
We made
hope
this new CBDC. It's brand new. We wasted half of it, so there's only half left.
Yeah, but the good news is we can just create more.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the Euro thing has been like, they've been trying to roll this out for a long time. So we'll see how it actually happens. So, are we going to see one in Canada anytime soon? Probably not. In the United States, I don't think so. Trump has said, like, no CBDCs. We're not going down that route, whatever. But then they are talking about, maybe like stablecoin or something, a digital equivalent of the US dollar. So something backed with USDC or something like this. So I don't know. We'll see. That the implementation could be good or could be bad, right? It could be very good for the US dollar, and it could devastate the currencies of other G7 countries.
Didn't I read somewhere that Tether was like number 7 now in the US Treasury hold? Anyway, this is totally random, but
it's
like the
it's not random,
largest.
because they have this stable coin that's backed by US Treasuries.
Yeah.
Right? And so they've made a use case for it, and now Trump and other people are looking at that going like, maybe we just adopt this thing wholesale, and then everybody across the world will have more access to US dollars, because you have the threat of BRICS and other places, like we're going to sell oil in different currencies and all this jazz, right? So, I mean, it could just be the further establishment of the US dollar at the expense of others. Or they could screw it all up and, have
All right. So on that note, we should wrap this up. CBDCs. They're coming. Should you be worried?
A little bit.
Okay. Keep your eyes open. Educate yourself.
I mean, we'll be back at some point with analysis of the Euro CBDC.
Yeah. And maybe we'll have some guest experts to talk about CBDCs.
Not just people who think they're experts?
Yeah. Expert.
Yeah.
If people don't want it, you can't force them. If they do want it, there's trouble. I like how you put that in the notes. See, we do use our notes.
I'm going with the more simpler Trump-esque explanation, right? Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Silly. Okay, thanks for listening, folks. Hope you got some value out of that. Until next time.
Steward your wealth wisely. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
If you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To learn more about the show, head on over to twostewards.ca and explore our free resources. To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We will see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.
Nailed it.